What's up, Bills Mafia? I'm Fernando Schmude. That's your leading the charge. And today I have Jamie D'Amico with me. It's a pleasure, brother, to have you back in the show. Welcome, Jamie.
Man, I am thrilled. After a long hiatus for both of us, it's really nice to get back in the swing, talk some Buffalo Bills. We've got training camp. I mean, what could be better? The football season is upon us. Yes, we've got the dog days of summer here in the northern hemisphere, where it's breaking 100 degrees Fahrenheit regularly here in Washington, D.C., where I live. You, though, were complaining about the cold, which equates to 50 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah, man. 50 degrees is pretty cold down here, man. I'm even with a little bit of a cold here. My voice is even a little bit messed up. And yeah, 50 degrees is pretty cold for us down here, man.
And what did you say? That's 10 Celsius?
Yeah, around this, yeah. And
Fortunately, your Canadian listeners will understand that.
yeah, man, they will be crazy about it, right? I gotta go to Buffalo and watch a game in football weather so I can deal with a real cold weather, right?
You absolutely do.
Yeah, man, but it's so good to be just around training camp. Actually, the rookies already reported to it, right? And soon we'll have the veterans joining them, and then football season is just like you said, upon us, and we'll be able to talk some Bills football again, practices, and enough of talking about predictions and more talking about what's actually happening, right? Can't wait to do so. But today we still have a subject that will try to kind of try to predict which guys will be able to impress us during training camp, even fool us again, because we've had some of them in the past, right, Jamie? Some of guys that all Bills Mafia got excited about and expected a lot from them, but it sometimes it materialized, but more often than not, it didn't go as well as we expected, right, man?
Right. And, as I gave this some thought when you told me about what it was we were going to be discussing, I got to thinking about a few aspects of it. And some of them rode training camps all the way into a starting spot on the team, and it just did not work out well. But that was a very different Bills team back then, where they were really starved for talent. Not what we have now. Like, if a rookie or a free agent is even going to make this team, they have to really perform not just in the preseason games, but also in the practices.
True, true. Yeah, man, and a lot of those guys will have their biggest opportunity right now because just like you said, it's not so easy. You don't have an easy path to playing time in this team, even with all the roster turnover and with a lot of people
Right.
questioning how good this roster still is, right? I think it's pretty fair to say that Sean McDermott and the coaching staff still have players that they trust a lot, at least in the starting lineup. For example, okay, you lost Stephon Diggs, but when you bring on a guy like Curtis Samuel, that a lot of people might be overlooking for now and underrating him a little bit, that's a guy that McDermott knows, that Bean knows, and mainly Joe Brady knows and was able to take the most of that guy in a weaker Carolina Panthers team. So
Mhm.
even Bills Mafia or ourselves question how good Curtis Samuel can be for this team, especially when you see Gabe Davis and mainly Stephon Diggs going away. I have no doubts in my mind that Joe Brady has plenty of trust in this guy to come in and to play a significant role in this offense and be a guy that Josh will be able to trust, right?
Well, I agree with that, and you also have to keep in mind the players that are coming back on the Bills roster, the veterans that are still developing, the young guys. And I think that is something that is it's easy to overlook, but it's also easy to overrate the players who which we have
Mhm.
a tendency to do. Familiarity, it breeds contempt, but it also breeds trust at times. So,
Mhm.
what is Khalil Shakir going to look like this year? I would imagine the Bills would not have let Stephon Diggs go if they didn't have a lot of trust in him. And I think everybody's expecting big things from uh, Now I'm drawing a blank. The tight end. Dalton,
Kincaid.
Dalton Kincaid. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. But it is this season to take a look at the players that you don't know quite as well. And I love that you brought up this subject, because who is it, Fernando, that we are as a fan base going to fall in love with in training camp?
Yeah, man. I brought in some names here to so we'll be able to discuss on both sides of the ball, and I hope you have your favorites as well. I have some guys that I have a big expectation, and sometimes it's even unfair to have big expectation for those guys, right? Because just like I said before, it hardly ever materialized. But all of us have those underdogs that we are rooting for, and we expect them to play a major role or to impress and surprise people. And I'm coming from a good year about that, because I was right there with Terrell Bernard, like he's gonna be the guy, he's gonna be the guy, and it materialized. So I was really happy about that, right?
I know, and
And
there I was on Twitter saying, Fernando, you're crazy.
not just you, everybody was out there like, come on,
You were
the
right
dude is a
again.
safety size, like how is gonna replace a beast like Edmonds, you know? And but there are some things that we can see in those some of those guys that we're gonna talk about today, that most of the time it's not enough to
No.
make them become starters or stars in the league, right? But sometimes those guys can impress and surprise some people, like Bernard did. So those are the guys that we're gonna try to talk about today, and the guys that I will absolutely keep an eye on during training camp and preseason, and so I hope we can bring some names that Bills Mafia can pay attention. And if one of them pays out, it's already great news for the Bills, right?
So, what are we thinking here? Are we going to discuss the players that are actually going to, say, be underdogs and make the team? Or are we looking at the players who we think the fans are going to fall in love with during training camp, but it just becomes another one of those, yeah, you loved them, but they didn't even make the team?
Yeah, man, we can do both, right? Because
Yeah.
which guys we believe will make the team, maybe, and can impress, and which guys probably will just be fool's gold. It's a nice conversation to have, and that's the idea for today's show. Bills Mafia, hit that like button, subscribe to my own Fernando Schmude channel, but it will be also be back with the Rumblings Network channel. Sarah Larson was able to do a great work and recover our account there. So if you are already a subscriber of the old Buffalo Rumblings channel and now Rumblings Network channel, you'll be able to follow us there as well. Also, please download, play, and rate our shows in your favorite podcast platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Megaphone, Amazon. We are all there, and we hope you can support us as you always done. João Paulo is out there already, a big brother of mine, Jamie, and he's saying hi, and then Death, Texas, and a wide receiver becoming a training camp darling.
Yes.
Even ends up in the roster, right?
It's always a
Walker,
receiver.
David Stills, right? And we have so many. I have some candidates today, and I believe you have as well, Jamie.
Yes. Absolutely. And may I take a moment for a shameless self plug here?
Okay.
We have not gone public with it yet. However, we will make this the official announcement.
Awesome.
The Jamie D and Big Newt podcast will be coming back in August on the Rumblings Network. Thank you to Sarah Larson for putting that together, and also joining you and the likes of the Bruce Exclusive with Bruce Nolan and a number of others. Thanks, man.
Yeah, man, it's a huge honor for me to have this announcement done in the Leading the Charge. It's obviously it adds value to my show for sure. And man, what a comeback by Bruce, right? I gotta mention that because he was not just top 4 podcast in America, but he was even higher here in Brazil. It's crazy. He had a huge number of downloads here in São Paulo and in Brazil, and Bills Mafia in Brazil loves Bruce, so I will make this moment, take advantage of this moment, Jamie, to tell Bruce, look, you are taking too long, man, to find a time for the leading the charge because Bills Mafia loves you, and Bruce obviously has a busy schedule and he needs to avoid FBI all the time. So, but he will be here sooner rather than later. And Bills Mafia loves when he joins as well. So, shout out to Bruce and congratulations for the awesome comeback. And I'm pretty sure Rumblings Network will kill it this season. It will be a great season for all of us. But let's go, Jamie. Let's start talking about those darlings. João said, talked about wide receivers, and I remember Rick Rogers. Man, I had huge
Oh, you
expectations.
remember Derrick Rogers?
Rick Rogers was one that I had huge expectations for him, man.
And do you remember when the Bills finally let him go? He went to the Colts and immediately had 100 yards receiving,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Bills Mafia was up in arms. How can you let this guy go? But the
That
reality of
DiCaprio
it
meme,
is,
like
yeah,
pointing out, like we knew it.
but the reality of it was that he was kind of a jerk that nobody wanted on the team. Like they didn't want
Yeah,
him around.
yeah,
So
yeah,
if you're good enough, your talent can overcome your personality. But you have to have one heck of a personality or to get yourself cut if you're good.
yeah, man.
And he turned out not to be
Absolutely.
great, right?
Yeah, yeah, true. That's true. And Chad Kelly can show us about it, right? What a way to throw out a career, right? But yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, man. There are a lot of things that we don't know, like, and that's why the interviews during the pre-draft process and we don't know how those guys carry themselves inside the locker room and that's why when we see the Bills drafting guys that are high character guys, especially in this moment, like with the all the roster turnover, people, some people here in Brazil, we have a saying about our football, soccer, because we used to have, we still have, but it's way less now. But we used to have a lot of guys that were crazy out of the pitch, but inside, when they were on the field, they were great. Romario has crazy stories in the past about losing nights of sleep before games and going to games and being the best player on the field, and a lot of others. And fans started to say, "Look, I don't want a player to marry my daughter. I want a player to perform on the field." And when we see the Bills drafting high character guys, a lot of people, especially here, but I'm sure in America as well, they are like, "Okay, those guys are good guys. They will work hard, but can they be superstars? Do they have the potential, the skills to dominate on the field?" And at the end of the day, obviously, we want those guys, but at the same time, we had a lot of examples of guys, in not even talking about Derrick Rogers, but Sammy Watkins, for example, that I was a big fan of and had huge expectations. And there is no denying his skill and his potential and what he could produce. Obviously, injuries played a major role in not working out, Sammy not working out, but at the same time, the way he didn't take care of himself out of the field, a lot of Bills fans had experiences, and I could interact via Twitter with some of them with saying things like, "Oh, some one once I went to a game and I was arriving in the stadium and Sammy was just leaving his car and he was drunk just before the game," like so. This kind of stuff definitely can keep guys away from reaching their full potential, and for guys in the bottom of the roster, it can be a career ending situation, right?
Absolutely. And Derek Rogers, I think, was one of those people. He had the character flaws and not the talent to keep him around because, as we've seen time and time again, teams will keep players with character flaws if they help the team win. But there's a fine line, right? So I'm going
Yeah.
to throw a name at you.
Okay.
Another wide receiver. Now, he didn't pan out, but not because of any personality problems. But do you remember Brendan Riley?
Brandon Riley, absolutely. Yeah.
Brendan
Yeah.
Riley was undersized. He was out of Nebraska, uh,
Hmm.
where he went to college, and he caught seemingly everything that was thrown his way. He made spectacular catches. But
Hmm.
here's what got overlooked by fans: those spectacular catches were always in the fourth quarter. And there was a need for spectacular catches because he couldn't get open.
Yeah.
So, so
Yeah.
when Nathan Peterman would throw him the ball back in 2018, he was
Mhm.
covered and had to do something spectacular to make the catch, which he did. He had great hands. But then, not only did he not make the team, and fans were surprised by it, he himself said that he was shocked. And then I
Uh-huh.
believe he spent a year and a half on the Bills practice squad. Was never elevated, but that name just kept coming up time and time again amongst fans in all
Yeah.
the chat rooms because, man, why isn't this guy playing? Well, the reason was he could not get open. And hey, Paulo, I loved the guy too. I loved him.
Yeah, man, absolutely. I can remember that. And in other names, David Seals, the Bills paid a huge money for an undrafted free agent to bring Seals to the team, and he even got another shot with the Giants after Shen and Dable went there, right? And so we can remember a lot of names. Robert Foster, I had huge expectations for him. Then he didn't make the team, and then when he got an opportunity, he became a great wide receiver for Josh Allen in the beginning of his career. But
Briefly.
man, the path was easier, right? He wasn't competing against top-notch pros, and he had an underachieving Kelvin Benjamin getting in and out of the lineup, injured or out of shape. He had other competitors that weren't really impressing. So the path was easier for a guy like Robert Foster to have an opportunity. Josh could make him work right with his speed sometimes, but when he went to other teams, it never worked out for him,
Right.
right? And on the other hand, Jamie, I'd like to remember when Stevie was here in the leading the charge, and he shared a nice story when I asked him how he could impress the coaches as a seventh round pick, because Steve is famous for reinventing the way you run routes, right? So bringing basketball moves and being totally unconventional, right? But I asked Stevie because it's easy for you if you are a guy, a first round pick, and you have all the confidence in the world, and the coaches will give you opportunities because the team invested so much on you. It's easy for this guy to tell the coaches, hey, let me try to do my thing here.
Yeah.
The coaches at least will give you an opportunity, you know? Now, if you are a seventh round pick, the coaches will be like, kid, just do what I'm telling you to do. Because if you want to be a hero by yourself, you won't see the field ever, you know?
Right.
And I asked Stevie, how could he implement this way of running routes and earn the trust of the coaches so he could do that and succeed, right? And Stevie said, look, I took advantage of all the open practices, training camp, uh, so when there were people watching, like the media, the fans, and I was going against Leodis McKelvin, who was a first round pick. I was going against Drayton Florence, who was a veteran, a respected one. In those opportunities, I was like, now I gotta do my thing so everybody can see it. You know, the fans will be able to see it, the media will be able to see it, the other vets will be able to see it. When I beat a first round guy badly, they will be, who's that guy? And man, this guy has something different, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
then the coaches would need to kind of swallow it, you know. And yeah, the guy's getting open and catching the passes. I can do nothing about that, you know. And that's the opportunity ahead of the guys that we're gonna talk today about, because they can make the world see them succeeding against Russell Douglas, against Christian Bamford, or you know, against those guys that if you have a bottom of the roster wide receiver beating or starters all the time in reps during training camps, and you'll be like, this guy might have something different that he can add to this team, right?
Mm-hmm.
John Paul is saying Des Lewis tricked him. Des Lewis had a lot of size, man. Yeah, Des Lewis was a big
It's
one as
always
well.
the receivers, too. It's
Yeah.
always the receivers.
Let's start talking about the receivers. So, since they are the main group in this kind of situation, Jamie, do you have a favorite one that you think that really can impress and make the team and nobody expecting him to do so?
Can he make the team? Well, that becomes a different sort of story.
Okay.
Now, there's the players who I think are going to impress in the preseason, and then there's the dark horse for making the roster. That is a different story that I don't think he's going to impress anyone during training camp or at least in the preseason games, but I think he might sneak onto the roster. What would you like to hear about first?
So go first with a guy that you might believe can make the roster, and then a guy that you think can fool everybody during training camp, but
Okay.
won't be that guy for us during the regular season.
I think Terrell Shavers, wide receiver, is going to end up making the team strictly as a gunner. I think
Okay.
this could be the guy who ends up taking the place of Tyler Medikevich and is just, or let's say Saran Neal. And this is going to be a guy who's in absolute terror that nobody can block. When he was coming out of college, he was known as the best gunner in all of college.
Mm-hmm.
But he didn't get drafted. The Bills signed him as an undrafted free agent and then stashed him away on the practice squad. Now,
Mm-hmm.
Brandon Beane has talked about this guy a couple of times in the offseason. And
Yeah.
I think that they are actually going to contemplate keeping 7 receivers on the roster just so they can sneak him on, because he may be the kind of guy that is a difference maker on special teams.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah, man.
who knows what it's going to look like with the new NFL kickoff rules? Maybe they need more guys like that.
Mhm.
We'll see.
Absolutely. Yeah, man. This guy is an interesting one. Um, and because I'm going with 7 receivers in my I at least I went with 7 receivers in my only 53 predictions so far for the year at Buffalo Rumblings, um, because of this, because of the special teams value. If we remember, you mentioned Tyron Neal, who hardly ever played on defense, but was a superstar special teams gunner, right?
Yeah.
There is even that photo of three Kansas City Chiefs guys in front of him before a punt, right? Like name a guy that has been dominant in what he does, and then there is that picture Bills Mafia loves to throw out. And remember how we used to have Taiwan Jones on the roster as well? Like he
Yep.
was a running back, but he wasn't really a running back for us. He never, he all, it was hardly ever to see Taiwan Jones playing running back snaps, but he was always there as a captain and a special teamer. So yeah, Shavers can be that guy, and he's still young. He's a guy that has some size and can maybe make some plays in preseason that Bills fans can be impressed about, but definitely his role will be as a dominant gunner, right?
Yeah, he's listed at 6'4", 211. I'd love to see him weigh about 10 pounds more than that at 6'4", but that's
Hmm.
beside the point. If he can show anything as a wide receiver, which I don't expect him to. He's
Mm.
out of Middle Tennessee State. He was not a world beater as a wide receiver there. If he can show anything as a wideout, he's got a much easier path to making the team.
Mm. Absolutely, man. Yeah. And which guy you don't see, you don't see making a team, maybe making some plays during
Okay,
preseason training camps, but he won't be there making the team, and it's fool's gold.
there are 2 guys that I'm
Okay.
thinking, and it's for a very similar reason, both of them. I foresee them both because they are quick, fast guys. What's going to happen is they're going to get on the field in the second half of preseason games, and they're going to be going up against guys who are physically overmatched. And
Mm.
what's going to happen? They're going to catch a pass, and they're going to turn on the jets, and they're going to outrun the corner and the safety, and people are going to go, wow, did you see that guy? And there's two of them. One
Okay.
of them did it to us last year. Andy Isabella,
Yeah.
a guy who, I mean, he's got some jets, right? He's fast,
Yeah.
but he couldn't seem to find his way on the field. The other one, now this guy has a puncher's chance to make the team, but I'm not sure if he will,
Yeah.
is KJ Hamler.
Yeah. KJ Hamler is actually my list, man.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he can maybe be that guy that, just like you said, he will face um some guys that will be limited physically to deal with his speed. If he's healthy, he will be able to make some plays deep downfield and
Mhm.
see him like, oh, this guy can be a huge weapon for Josh going deep, right? It's not easy for him to make the team because I believe Marcus Valdez-Scantling is that guy, the guy that they signed for this role,
Mhm.
going deep and stretching the field. But who knows if Hamler can really impress? Maybe he has a shot. But I agree, he can be on both groups, right? In the Shavers group, in or in the Fools Gold group, because yeah, man, he has the tools to make the plays against backups and guys that won't be in the league, and will be it be enough to make the team? Time will tell, but it's gonna be interesting to see during the training camp and preseason, right? More in the training camp than in preseason because he might have an opportunity to do that in training camp against our top-notch corners or top corners in depth chart, and then people. Might value it more than against backups. But still, Russell Douglas isn't known for his speed, right? And
No.
Christian Benford as well. He's a bit faster than Russell Douglas, but he's in the fastest cornerback out there. So
Right.
in one-on-ones, Hamler has all the tools to impress against them, right?
Right. Right. But being on the field has been, that's been a problem for
Mhm.
him. So if
Yeah,
you use a roster spot on a guy that ends up on the injured reserve after 6 games, who have you potentially let go that would be helping you for the entire season? It's a tough thing to consider, but we'll see, because that is the one thing that we have not discussed, is that there are inevitably injuries during training camp that are going to shape the complexion of the roster. But
mhm.
I've now thrown out a bunch of names at you, and I feel like I'm dominating the conversation. I would love to
No,
know who you think is going to. Uh,
no way, no way. I love to hear your thoughts about those guys. And yeah, Hamler was a guy, but a guy that um has already fallen short with the mini camps. I expected him to be better during mini camps, and impress more without the pads on. And since this guy is a big guy, strong guy, and his first real shot at making the team, and if he finally impresses during training camp, I don't think it will be enough. Is Justin Shorter, man, or fifth round pick for a year ago. I think he will get his shot like during the training camps and preseason to impress because there was made an investment on him. Bean loves his draft picks. We know that. So and he seems like a guy that has all the tools physically, but to see him struggling with drops during mini camps, man, it's not the right time to have to deal with drops. Imagine when you are dealing with physicality and pads on and it's for real, right? So I will try to stay away for getting impressed by Shorter, no matter how good he can be during training camps and preseason.
well, receivers. There's two things receivers need to do, and I'm tired about hearing about how great of a blocker Gabe Davis was, because for me, there's two things that need to happen. They need to get open, and they need to catch the ball. And if you're not doing one of those two, you can't play wide receiver for my team.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. If you can do any of them, man, you are in trouble, right?
If
Shorter,
you can't do any of them, you end up with a podcast.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, go try another thing, man. Because, for example, just like you said, Brandon really at least could catch the ball, right?
Yes.
And even Keon Coleman, people question if he can get open, but when you see this guy catching the ball, you see this guy has some special hands, right? The way
Mhm.
his technique, the way he catches the ball, plugs it in, it's special. So he has time to develop his route running and his ability to get open. But he already has a pretty nice tool to add to this offense.
Mhm.
And shorter with all that size, if he can catch the ball, he's in a guy that will get open so easily. He's in
It,
the twitching,
it's
most twitchy guy. So.
he seems like a clone of Mac Hollins in some
Mhm.
ways, like similar size. Both are going to sort of lean on for special teams reps.
Mhm.
But Hollins has proven that he can at least catch you 20 balls a season.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, man. And having McCollins as a proven commodity there already, it makes his case even more difficult, right? It seems he's a
Mhm.
guy for practice squad yet again, and then we'll see how he develops there. And one guy that if he really impresses during training camps and will get me excited, this guy is Chase Claypool because this guy, man, it's not. We're not talking about a guy that has been or was a good wide receiver in college and never impressed in the NFL. No, we know that he already put up the production in NFL level, right? He's being a great wide receiver. Speaking about NFL level, so he had some problems, character problems. He had some. He had to deal with some difficult times in his previous few stops, but he knows it's his last opportunity to succeed, and he's in the best possible situation since he left Pittsburgh with Josh Allen throwing him the ball. So if this guy can do well during training camp, keep it up because he's been impressing during OTAs, mini camp. So if you can keep it up, this guy will get me excited because he actually produced at NFL level at the highest level. So I believe he can replicate it. If he can keep it up, I will be excited about this guy.
Here's something that I think works toward his advantage when it comes to making the Buffalo Bills roster is that who do you see as being more likely if they were cut to be picked up by another team? Because so often the Bills want to push somebody through to the practice squad.
Mhm.
But is Chase Claypool the type of guy who would accept a practice squad assignment, or is he going to still feel like he has the opportunity to go somewhere and potentially even start? So
Mhm.
if you compare him to, like, let's just say KJ Hamler again, a guy who you're worried is going to get injured versus
Mhm.
Claypool, who, if you let him go, well, that guy might get picked up real quickly by someone else. Plays to Claypool's advantage if, and this is going back to it,
Mhm.
if his level of play can exceed his character flaws.
Mhm.
Now, like you said, it's probably his last opportunity, and he knows that. And, when people are backed into the corner, you oftentimes are going to get the best out of them as an athlete. But
Mhm.
I hope he pans out. I hope he ends up a starter and playing like the guy that we saw in Pittsburgh, not
Mhm.
the guy who refused to block for the Chicago Bears
Mhm.
and also didn't even run routes when he wasn't getting
Mhm.
the ball. Like, what the hell is that?
Yeah.
But if he can have his head on straight and show the physical prowess that we know he's got, this guy could be a starter. This guy could be an
Mhm.
impact player. He could make a real difference in this Buffalo
Mhm.
Bills team.
Yeah, man, 100%. Bills Mafia, hit that like button, subscribe to Fernando Schmude channel, support my work here. Rumblings Network is back, so pay attention. Keep an eye on the Rumblings Network YouTube channel and also on every podcast platform. Your favorite platform is there are all the shows are back there. We'll be back there. Jamie will be back with his show in August, and it's gonna be great as it always was. And so support us. I really appreciate it. And so, still about offense, which other guys do you see now that we already talked about the position that dominates this kind
Right.
of situation during training camps, but still on the offensive side of the ball, looking at the depth chart, looking at the roster, which other guys do you think can can impress Bills Mafia and make the team, or maybe impress but not really enough to be able to make us dream about a hidden gem.
Every year, there is a running back that gets the lion's share of carries and puts up a ton of yardage. And that's
Yeah,
almost always the guy who gets cut. But people become familiar with their name because they see him carry the ball a lot. They see their name in the statistics. Darrington Evans is going to be that guy. We're going to know his name by the end of training camp. He's not making the team.
man, I always remember the number 35. It seems always been to number 35. It started with Joique Bell. Joique Bell was great for us, like
Yeah.
during preseason, and man, this guy is great. And then he became a good player for Detroit, but not for us, right? And
Yeah.
after Joique Bell, man, so many 35s that I remember. I don't remember his first name, but Murphy. Murphy had
Oh, yes.
his 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 moments with the Bills. He had some opportunities during the regular season as well. He started wearing number 40 and ended up wearing number 35. And man, it seems like every year we find a good 35. Gillisley was a 35. So Tolbert was a 35, but Tolbert was in a different situation. But every year it seems we find a 35 productive one that plays running back and ends up leaving the team.
I totally forgot about Mike Tolbert. That guy was so chubby.
Yeah, man.
He was
He
a
was
load.
third and 15, third and long. He was Tyrod's go-to target. Man, I love Tyrod Taylor, but I had to take this shot at him because, man, if something about Tyrod pissed me off, man, it was like third and 10. Check down to Tolbert and leave the field, put the game on the hands of the defense, and Tyrod leaves the field like jogging with a nice posture, like the Hall of Fame quarterback after scoring a touchdown. Like, did my job, protected the ball,
Oh
and
my gosh.
now the defense is gonna deal with it.
It was maddening how much that guy, he would only throw outside of the hash marks and he would never take a chance. He always threw the ball out of bounds because he never wanted to turn it over. The one time he decided he was going to go down the field with the ball is with the Giants last year against the Bills. I'm like, who is this guy? Where was he when he played in Buffalo?
Yeah, man, true. Yeah, he had to deal with a lot of stuff to finally give it a try, right?
Right.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
the difficult part of this exercise is that we don't get a lot of screen time with the linemen.
Hmm.
So it's going to be really hard to know who's particularly playing well. But, there's a lot of opportunities for people to make the team as a backup this year. And
Hmm.
I'm curious how that's going to shake out.
Yeah, man. Vandermark was a guy talked highly a lot last season, right?
Yep.
And a guy that the Bills Cromer seems to be developing, and I'm definitely keep an eye on him during preseason. And obviously, we hope our offensive line can stay healthy, just like last season. But it's not very realistic to have the offensive linemen playing all these snaps,
No.
all games, like the same offensive line. It doesn't happen every year, right? So we'll need some guys to step up at least for a game or two. And Vandermark is one of those guys that I will keep an eye on for sure, and see how he's been developing. He has all the tools, athletically speaking. And Vampire Granger, a rookie that a lot of people is high on him. I am high on him, but not high enough to to put him in a starting conversation for now, or taking over for McGovern right now. So even if he plays really well, I wouldn't buy in on a competition with McGovern now, because I believe McGovern, he won't be bad enough to open this competition. He might not be perfect, but I believe he'll be good enough to keep this job at least for the start of the year and see how it goes during the season.
So they signed a guy, an undrafted free agent named Keaton Bills. Do you
Mhm.
think they signed him because he has an opportunity to make the name, or they just liked that his last name was Bills?
Yeah, the name and the jersey number, it looked good, right? Like the
Yeah.
foundation date of the team, the Bills on it seems like great propaganda for the team, but but I don't know, man. I just like you said, we it's hard to see enough from them. It's more like what Cromer says, I believe, during training, so it will define the chance of those guys because um, one thing for sure, I started to notice last season. Remember how bad it was 3 or 4 years ago when our backup quarterbacks needed to show something, but they had no chance because the offensive line, the backup offensive line, was so poor.
Yeah.
They had no time to operate. And now it seems the Bills finally can. Last preseason, it was already like this. The Bills can line up and field a pretty good backup offensive line that allows the backup quarterback to play decently, the backup offense to play well. And we see the Bills haven't lost many preseason games recently. And one of the reasons, I think, is the Bills having some depth in the offensive line finally, So I think they'll have nice competition there and maybe being even find a way to trade a guy there just like he already did in the past, right? When we didn't have so much depth like right now.
I think you make a really good point, actually. And last season, people were really questioning the depth that the Bills had. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that fans and media are not familiar with the names. But that
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily mean that they're not good players. That just means we don't know them yet. We haven't seen them in regular season action. And when you use that as a litmus test, how much time do the backup quarterbacks have to throw? Something I didn't actually consider, but I
Mm.
think you're really onto something there, and I'm going to pay much more attention to that.
Yeah, man, I kind of remember AJ McCarron, uh, man, even Jake Fromm when he got drafted, like those guys had no shot behind those backup offensive lines. They were getting levels all the time. So recently it's been different, and props to this offensive line, and big props to Coach Cromer. I'm a big fan of Cromer as a coach. I think he's um, the most dependable coach, or I don't know if dependable is the right word, but if I need to rank the Bills coaches, I think Cromer is at the top of the list. Like as a proven guy that has won, has been out there for a long time producing. Loved him when he was with the Bills. I felt like the Bills' offensive line had trouble when he wasn't there anymore, and now coming back, it took a year. The first year it wasn't the best one, but he had to work on those guys, on his technique, on his preferred way of playing, and we could see it working out for the last season. And I really trust him. That's why I'm so high on McGovern as a center. I'm not worried about Edwards as a left guard. My problem, or my fear with Edwards is if he can stay healthy, because he's a guy that had some concussion problems in the past as well. But if he can stay healthy as a full-time starter, right? But then the Bills have Collins, a guy that's trying to rebound. The Bills have Vamper Granger, a guy that fell a lot and they could pick, right? And just them deciding last season to trade away Ryan Bates, a guy that offered some good snaps anywhere in this offensive line. He could line up on every position and play decently, right? And they
Yeah,
felt comfortable enough to trade him. It shows they trust those guys, right?
absolutely. And the guy who they're talking about this year, sort of stepping into that play any position role, is Alec Anderson,
Mm-hmm.
who they must have been confident last year that
Mm-hmm.
Anderson could play as well as Bates.
Hmm.
But when they let Ryan Bates go, I thought that was a very risky move. I didn't
Yeah,
think
me too. I
going
love
into
Bates.
last year that they had the depth that I would have wanted them to have. But then again, they were paying him like $4 million a season. That's an awful lot for a backup interior
Hmm.
lineman.
Hmm.
Typically, you want to get those guys for as close to the veteran minimum as you can. And it we're in the era of the salary cap. You can't pay everyone, right?
Yeah.
And somewhere on the roster, you're going to have a hole.
Hmm.
And I think last year they rolled the dice and said, okay, we've let a lot of people go. We're bringing in young guys. We think they're going to develop, and we're also praying that nobody gets injured. And they didn't. The offensive line
Hmm.
played together the entire year. That, like
True.
you said, that never happens. So what we're going to see, and this is a big baseball term, we're going to see regression to the mean here.
Mm. Yeah, man. Yeah. But I feel like they are prepared, at least if you need a guy to enter for 1, 2, 3 games and fill
Mhm.
uh, a starter's place here. I think they have actually several names that might be able to do so. Just like I said, Van der Mark is a tackle. Collins can play inside and out. Van Granger probably will be worked out as a guard as well because we know how people love to play centers at guard first. Eric Wood started at guard for us, right?
Yeah.
And it might be even the easiest path for him to become a starter as a left guard in the future in Edwards' place, maybe, and not in McGovern's place if he can hold down that center position. So the Bills have some names to to look out and during this training camp and to get familiarized with them. So because those guys should play some meaningful snaps this season. Jamie, let's move on to the other side of the ball and see on defense which guys might be able to carve up a place in this roster and maybe even impress enough to see some snaps on the field, or which guys will simply fool us during training camps and but won't be there during regular season.
But on the defense, when I was thinking about this, I was considering that the farther the player is away from the ball, much like on the offense, the more likely it is that we're going to see them make splash plays. So
Okay.
the interior defensive linemen, we're really not going to see too much happening there. Now, the defensive ends, well, they start racking up sacks. You might see a
Mhm.
guy like Javon Solomon coming out of
Yeah, this guy is
Troy.
on my list, man.
But then when you start moving back a level, now if you have a linebacker on the field that's running all over the place, tackling everyone, they're hitting backs for losses, they're getting interceptions. I mean, this sort of thing can happen, and these are the types of guys who play their way onto the team. I've seen it happen through the years with various linebackers that end up in supporting roles.
Mhm.
Um, I I've got to wonder if, even though he's a veteran, Deion Jones might be the guy that everybody's clamoring to see on the field by the end of camp.
Yeah, man. I actually had him in my first 53 prediction. I had him over Spectre, and people were shouting at me on Buffalo Rumblings message boards because, oh, come on, Spectre is their guy. But just like when we're talking about Hamler, Spectre has dealt with a lot of injuries, and every time he steps on the field, it seems you found something interesting, but then he gets injured and he's not there. And Dion Jones is a guy that he was an all pro player, he was a superstar in the league at some point, and he obviously isn't this guy anymore, but we
Right.
don't have AJ Klein around anymore. And sometimes it's good to have an experienced guy in the room, and being that safety valve at the end of the roster. So I feel like the Bills have Dorian Williams as the main plan in case you need linebacker stepping up for Bernard or Milano. And they signed Morrow to be maybe the the guy to, if Dorian doesn't work out, you have Morrow with some experience coming from the Eagles, you know.
Yes.
Then we were talking about the fifth linebacker, the sixth linebacker, you know, and decisions will need to be made. If Dion Jones can showcase his skill, and again, he'll play against some guys that won't even be in the league when he gets on the field. He can be really quality when he get those snaps, and he might carve up a place in this roster, right?
Another linebacker that I thought was going to be the starter last year and seemed to drop like a rock down the depth chart over the course of the season was Dorian Williams, who
Mm-hmm.
has all the physical talent in the world. I just feel like Sean McDermott does not trust him to be in the
Mm-hmm.
places where he's supposed to be on defense. I mean, we saw some plays in him or from him, including in the playoffs, where his closing speed was just phenomenal, and they were even keying in on that on the broadcast. So, like, look how
Mm-hmm.
quick he gets to the sideline. But I'm wondering if he's going to be able to understand the defense well enough and understand where he's supposed to be well enough, because you know it doesn't matter how good you are if you're out of position. Coaches are not going to put you
Mm-hmm.
in because that weakens the rest of the defense. So the other 10 guys have to make up for it when you're not in the right place at the right time. But man, I got to tell you, Fernando, this is a guy who's going to make some splash plays, and I expect those to come in bunches, because I think as he comes in, especially if he's playing in the second half of games, he's going to be so much more athletic than so many of the players on the field that they're
Mm-hmm.
going up against.
Yeah, man, he seems like a hit-seek missile, right?
Yep.
And we could see some of those splash plays, even in his opportunities. And then when he wasn't on the field anymore, particularly was like, what's going on, man? Why did he take him out of the field? He's doing great, but he's doing great in the plays we can see. We aren't there in the room seeing what he was supposed to do, where he was supposed to be. We might be talking about the opposite situation to Terrell Bernard, who I could trust 100% that he would be a guy that would be the right place, right time. We would know from the film study standpoint what he was supposed to do, and that's why I trusted him so much. And with Dorian, he might be have all the size, speed, all the traits, but he gotta be better in the film room or knowing the defense, just like you said. So yeah, man, this guy he should make some plays, and especially if Milano doesn't seem right when coming back, we can see some Bills Mafia people talking like, "Hey, maybe Dorian is a better option for the start of the year until Milano feels like himself again," you know?
I I do wonder about that. But here's something else that I wonder about, and this is kind of a random question that's off the subject matter. But I'm looking at the Bills' top, say, uh, I looked at their top 4, 5. Okay, I'm looking at their top 5. Now make it 6
Okay.
linebackers according to their depth chart. Only one of them weighs over 225 pounds.
Yeah.
And in fact, Nicholas Morrow is only 215. Are we
Mm-hmm.
looking at, obviously, they're built to stop the pass,
Mm-hmm.
but are we looking at players who we can reliably say are going to get injured because on running plays, they're going up against guys that outweigh them by 75 to 100 pounds?
Yeah, man. I'm the one thing that really worries me about Bernard and Milano is I feel like they always will be nicked up at some point in the season, you know. It's difficult. You gotta be so lucky to have those guys lasting all season long, dealing with all that traffic inside, and not just them, but Taron Johnson playing also the role he plays. You know, it's man, it's really tough, and I recently wrote it. It's a text that's coming out at Buffalo Rumbling soon about ranking our players against their peers and NFL peers, and I have the best ranked players in the Bills defense, like nearest the top of the league, are those linebackers, Bernard and Milano, and Taron Johnson. So it's the heart of this news version of this Bills defense, and we need those guys on the field, you know. and they are exposed to get injured, to get nicked up for sure because of the size and the way they play, right? It's just like I feel like the Bills have gone in this direction of fielding a smaller, quicker defense, but we see already opposing teams, even the Kansas City Chiefs, lining up three tight ends, two tight ends all the time, and trying to run the ball and physically outmatch those guys, right? So it's something to keep an eye on and see how McDermott and Babbage adjust during the regular season.
And I'm glad you brought up Taron Johnson, because to me, he is the most important player on the Buffalo Bills defense.
Mhm.
And it's not even close. He's the
Yeah,
one who makes that defense work.
yeah, man. No, and we don't have a guy to replace this kind of production,
No.
that offers everything. Maybe Bishop can become a guy that can help there, but I can't see Bishop being a coverage guy like Taron Johnson to deal with slot wide receivers. Ken Lewis, Ken Lewis is a name that I want to bring him because Ken Lewis has impressed during some training camps.
Mhm.
He got injured, but when he came back, he had a great game against the Bears. And Ken Lewis, I can see him doing so well at safety, and when he needs to replace Taron Johnson, he looks like a liability, because Taron Johnson is different. He's special, right?
He's great. Yeah, absolutely great. Who do you see making some interceptions that fans are going to really enjoy watching?
Yeah, man, that's something we'll keep an eye during this training camp. Man, the guy that I maybe can impress the most and carve up a role, I think, is Jamarcus Ingram.
Mm-hmm.
If Elon continues to struggle just like the other seasons, Ingram might be up to impress some people and maybe even make Elon expendable. I've heard that Elon has played really well. I hope he can keep it up and and be this third outside cornerback option. But Ingram is a guy that I will keep an eye on, and he might be able to play even better than Elon and make Elon expendable.
That Jamarcus Ingram making the roster would be a great story. He's a guy who went to the University of Buffalo, not a powerhouse program. They bring in the local guy. He's got good length. He's 6'2", weighs about 190. That's the kind of guy that they have shown repeatedly that they can coach up in Buffalo. Like,
Mm.
honestly, Christian Benford, I think, is a great player. I don't think
Mhm.
he gets his recognition, but I think he's a great, maybe an exaggeration. I think he's a very good player, especially considering he was a late round draft pick. I think he's
Mhm.
an excellent performer. And I have so much faith in this coaching staff's ability to get the most out of defensive backs. You could end up seeing Jamarcus Ingram starting if there's an injury and the Bills not missing a beat.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, man. And I say that with still having hope in Elon, But if
Yep.
Elon, for me, it's pretty clear that it's his last opportunity to impress. By the end of this preseason, if England has impressed more than him, I think that it's pretty likely they will make a decision like they did with Boogie Basham last season and trade
Hmm.
him for something that they can get.
Yep.
Because the time is running up for him and they will need to pay him soon or have a decision about his future. So he will need to impress, and he's been doing well during mini camps and OTAs, but now pads on preseason, playing against other teams. Now it's time for Elon to show that he can be reliable, right? And he can be an option.
It's a
And if
different
he
game.
yeah, and if he doesn't do that, if he doesn't show consistency, England might leapfrog him in the depth chart.
Hmm.
Jamie, let's talk about the safeties or other position if you have somebody else because time is running up and Sarah is gonna kill me having another episode over 1 hour.
I think, and this one is not going to surprise anyone, I think by the end of next season, we are all going to love Cole Bishop.
Okay, yeah, this
I
is
I just think he's going
everybody
to be
hopes, but
everyone's favorite player.
Yeah.
He's a hard hitter. He's athletic. He's got a pretty good nose for the ball. I
Mhm.
think he's going to come in and he's going to blow up some receivers and some running backs, and we're going to all stop and say, "Who is that kid?"
Yeah, absolutely, man. Especially with the way we've seen Jordan Poyer declining athletically, right? And even Micah Hyde to some extent are dealing with injuries. When you see a guy coming in and looking fast and hitting hard, it kind of pops out, you know. I remember having this feeling with Ken Lewis last season during the last preseason game against the Bears. Everybody was saying how good he was doing during training camp, and he got injured. He missed the first few preseason games. And when he came in against the Bears, he was flying all around and
Mhm.
hitting hard. And I was like, my goodness, Ken Lewis is looking good, you know? And it was actually just a case of Jordan Poyer being a step slower and Hyde as well, you know. And when you have a guy that has those athletic skills, and I feel like Bishop can do even better than that with his size because Ken Lewis is a small guy, right? Now Bishop with his size, he can be a difference maker and a hard hitter there, and I feel like his challenge is the same as Dorian, you know, like to know
Yeah.
the defense, be in the right place, right time, communication, and to earn that trust from McDermott, from Babbage. But when he has it done, man, his athleticism should shine and pop out and scream, and Bills Mafia should love him.
I'm with you.
That's it. So, Jamie, thank you so much, man, for joining me today. I could stay here talking ball with you all afternoon, and it would be awesome. But unfortunately, we run out of time. I feel like Bills Mafia really enjoyed it as well. And the doors of the Leading the Chart is always wide open. Whenever you want to join, you're welcome, man. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I'm so flattered that you invited me. What you do is great. I love it. I'm glad your show is back, and I'm just so happy to be able to be a part of it with you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, man. And please, Bills Mafia, don't forget his show is back in August, right, Jamie? Big Newt and Jamie back in August. So support us, like, subscribe to the Rumblings Necro channel, and thank you so much, Bills Mafia. I'll be back on Sunday with Portuguese version of the Leading the Charge for Brazil and Latin America, Bills Mafia. So thank you so much. See you around. Go Bills.